Hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. We have the wonderful Emma Mills-Sheffield with us to talk us through how you can build a rock-solid business plan. Emma is the founder of Mind Setup. She is a coach, consultant, and generally just wonderful, lovely person, and she's got so much knowledge, so I think you are really going to enjoy today's session. Do get involved in the chat and say hello, let us know where you're from. If you've got some questions, pop them in the Q&A box just next to the chat at the bottom. Emma will be going through those at the end. Oh, lots of love hearts coming up. That's so nice to see. So much love for you already, Emma.
That's great. I wonder if we've got any people I know in here. I always love it when I see a name I recognise.
This session will be recorded, so don't worry if you miss out on anything. You can catch up in your own time. We will send you an email with the link to watch the recording tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Big thank you to BT Digital Skills for making this webinar possible today. We couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, I shall hand over to you now, Emma, for the session.
Amazing. Thank you. Hi to everybody. Good morning. Firstly, and I need to know what's happening because this is all very British. What's the weather doing where you are? I am in not so sunny Brighton today. It's drizzly, and I do hope somebody has sunshine somewhere. So good morning and welcome to planning for 2025. We are going to spend a bit of time here with a very practical session on really planning for next year, but also reflecting on what we've done so far. We sometimes just like crack on and we realise we're hitting January, we're already halfway through the month. We're like, I haven't got a plan yet. That's absolutely fine. We're at the end of November. We've got a few weeks of the year left. And we tend to do this on I'd say a calendar basis. So we always say, right, the year starts in January. However, you might have a financial year that starts in September or April, and that's absolutely fine. So you want to do a planning session like this when it's relevant for your business, and whether that's for a financial year or a calendar year. But typically this will work really well for January, giving you just that lead in before the crazy season starts. Or for some of you, Christmas might be quite quiet and it's quite nice to spend time between the two holidays to actually stop and take stock and make a plan. So we've got nearly an hour together. We'll have Q&A. And if you have a question, do put it in the actual Q&A box, because we've got lots of lovely chat coming up in the webinar. And this is great. It's nice to introduce yourselves. People tend to make contact afterwards and that sort of thing. So hi from anyone else in Stocky Brighton, and nice to see you, Marina, as well. Very lovely. And lots of other names I recognise in here, so that's great. We're going to make a start, and it'll be a nice friendly session for a Tuesday morning. Okay, even a Wednesday morning. Sorry, I've lost a day of the week already. That's a good start, isn't it? Okay, so a little bit about me. I am based in sunny Brighton. I've been featured in different publications for different business planning and productivity and leadership advice. I've been a consultant now for 5.5 years now, nearly 6, after I left the corporate world, and I spent time working in different corporates, engineering, accountancy, creative, digital, all sorts over the years. But what I've learned from the bigger business and the strategy planning sort of aspect is really how to now tailor that for small businesses. And small and scaling businesses are absolutely my passion, just to see the work that everybody puts in, and that kind of, you're not encumbered by a big corporate structure. You can be creative, you can try things, you can fail fast, you can create something new. And actually the tenacity that I know small business owners have is huge, because you can't do this alone. And often people are doing something on the side of still having a full-time job or having a busy family life. So when we look at business planning today, we're going to do it in a very practical sense. So I've also, during COVID, I also started a small product business, Brighton Preserves. And the reason I put that in there now is to show I've also had a different exposure to small business. It's easy to say, well, I'm a consultant and I know best, but that's, those are just words. The proof is actually in the pudding. So I thought I'd start from literally no money, design a website, design a product, start to get going and see how it went. And I won two awards at the World Marmalade Awards, which actually exist, almost to just prove it can be done. But I've actually decided to mostly wrap that up now because it's too much on top of everything else. Now, it might sound like a little bit of a side quest, but the reason I put it in here is because I understand what it's like to literally have a kitchen table business as well as everything else that you do. So let's look at planning. Now, most people say I haven't got time to plan. This famous quote from Abraham Lincoln was that if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Now, we do have to spend time planning, and we are on the hamster wheel of running a small business and juggling everything else, which generally means we just get so into the detail, but we do have to stop. We have to step out. We have to look back in on our business critically to understand what's happening with it, where we want to go, what we want to change, and really what that focus will be for the next year. So whether you've been in business you're starting out now, you've been in business for a year, 5 years or 10 years, you'll be able to take something away from this session today on planning for next year. So there are 4 sort of main topics we'll cover. We'll look at the key priorities for your business plan, some of the pitfalls to avoid. We'll make sure we're on track. So we use a few different tools to understand what we're doing throughout the year and making sure we've got that sort of GPS still aligned. And then also thinking about plan B. So we need to also have a bit of resilience in our business and make sure that we've got plans for when revenue changes, people change, the market changes, all sorts. So I'll give you some tips on that too. So I want you to start putting some answers into the chat, please. I'm going to read out 4 statements and you can pick A, B, C, or D. And what do you think the biggest challenge facing your business in 2025 is? So that could be A, certainty around cash flow, or maybe customers only are willing to spend less now. B, finding new business opportunities. C, being able to stick to a plan whilst I juggle everything else. And D, no real change from this year. So A, certainty around cash flow. B, new business opportunities. C, being able to stick to a plan. And D, no real change from this year. Okay, we've got some really interesting points coming up here. So typically, I would say some of the challenges I've seen on sessions like this are really sort of the main focus is around actually being able to juggle everything, sort of as a small business owner. And also not necessarily sticking to a plan, but there's a lot here around certainty around cash flow or customer spend. So that's quite interesting. When we look at planning, when we look at doing our business plan, we need to be really pragmatic and also understand where the money might come from, what people are willing to pay, and sometimes be really critical about whether we can even afford to run the business. So we'll look at that in detail now. I'll give you some tips around what a business plan should have. We'll look at some SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that means you can get a better understanding of what your strengths are, but also what opportunities are in the market and what your competitors are doing. So then you can get a really pragmatic and sensible view of what the lay of the land is and how you might plan around it. So keeping it very practical in a business plan. So what should it have? So it should have an executive summary. So that's your key overview of what the document actually contains. So if I only read the first page, in the first couple of paragraphs, I understand what it is that you're offering. So what your business plan has in it, and also what you're offering to the market. You should then have a bit of an overview of why your business exists. So what's your vision? What are your goals? What's your ambition? How do you explain what you do to other people, but also have that real passion for it, so you can make it very clear that you serve a certain audience because they have an unmet need, and you are absolutely brilliant at doing that. Or it could be that you provide a luxury product. So then you might not have a need in the market, but you want to tap into people's desires and their sort of their vision and their dreams. You then have SWOT analysis, which we'll do in more detail on the next slide. Then what's your marketing strategy? So you have a target market or audience, and how do you approach them? How do you go to them? Do you have a strategy for social media? Are you face-to-face networking? What's your, how do you approach your different audiences? And do you, most importantly, understand who your audience is? You need a bit of market analysis summary, and that's including your competitors. So who else is operating in the space that you are? How big is the market? Are you operating predominantly online? Are you a service-led industry? Do you have only B2B, business-to-business clients? Or would you find that advertising products on Instagram, because they're highly visual, would actually be a great place for you? But where do you fit? And it's quite sort of easy to say, well, everyone's my customer, but that's really not the case. If you're setting up a cafe, do you know that the location you've picked is right? Are you too close to another cafe that maybe it's cheap and cheerful? And that's absolutely fine. It serves a certain audience. Are you finding that it doesn't quite align to what you're doing because you want to have bespoke, luxury, more artisan products? So if you're selling a croissant for £5 versus selling one for £1, super different audience. Is your target market people going to work? Are you near a station? Are you on the school run? And so you want to catch people after school. Maybe you want to have a sort of an easy family cafe with that sort of feel to it. You want coffee mornings. You want people just popping in and taking their time and sort of spending a bit more time in the cafe with you. Or perhaps it's fast food. Perhaps you need to churn people out quickly. All of these are still cafes, but they have a very different feel. And so if you've got an artisan bakery one road away from you and they're quite well established, would you have an artisan bakery in the next road? Because you might argue that, well, they're doing well, so there's enough of an audience, but how can you differentiate? So be very critical when you're looking at the size of the market and also who your competitors possibly are. Something else you need to have in a business plan is an overview of the financials. Where does your revenue come from? Or maybe what are your income streams? So if you have let's use the cafe analogy, do you have a certain amount of spend that people come in and spend about £7.50? That's the average, because they come in, they have a coffee, they have a slice of cake or sandwich, and maybe that's it. So do you also have takeaway products? Do you have coffee beans that they can buy in bags? In which case, that's actually another revenue stream, because you can't sell your sandwiches online, but you can sell bags of coffee beans or ground coffee online. So that becomes a slightly different element of the business. So that can run 24/7, so pretty much. And it's, again, a different group of people. So for every revenue stream you have, you need to make sure you understand the target market for these products or services. And also how much profit you make out of each. Then lastly, second to last, have an overview of services and products. So what is it you do? Make it really clear. A lot of people in service industries as well can have very broad ranges where they do a little bit of everything for lots of different clients. But what you really want to have is a very clearly defined service. You might provide a one-to-one service. You might provide training or a program of 6 sessions. But then outside of that, other things are then bespoke. It becomes too confusing if we say we provide all these things to all these people, but we're not very clear on exactly who they are. And then lastly, what's your structure? So this might sound a bit big for the sole traders amongst us, but what's your management structure? What roles and responsibilities do you have? And what operational support do you have? You probably haven't got any. I mean, you might have a bookkeeper. You might have someone help with social media. Typically, it's just going to be you. But that's also okay. But it's sensible to break out what parts of the role you do. So if you're a beautician, what you do is that's the service you deliver. But you also have sales, you have accounting, you have marketing. All of these things need to be done. Although you might do them, it's helpful to break them out so you can see how much time you're spending, and also whether it's better for you and cheaper to see one more client a week and take that money and then outsource your bookkeeping and outsource your social media. So we do try and fit everything in at once as small business owners. And when we start out, we pretty much have to. But in order to grow, it makes sense to start splitting out these different tasks within their own functions or departments. So imagine you are your CEO and you're running this, and you've got your HR department, you've got your sales, you've got your marketing, you've got your accounting, and you've got your IT. So that way you can then understand who you want to start getting in as a freelancer, or how you want to increase your team size. The nice to haves in a business plan. We don't need those today, but it's good to just have a quick overview in case any of these phrases come up or catch you out and you think you might need to have them. If you're going for a bank loan or a more complicated grant application or investment, you're probably going to need to provide more in-depth detail. And also you're going to have to provide much more on the financials. So who's in your supply chain? Do you need to provide information on how ethical they are and how you choose suppliers? Do you have one supplier which might get you a great price on something, but is it risky and you need to spread that across other suppliers in case they put their prices up? Do you collaborate with other businesses? And do you work in partnership with other people? So if you do, start to detail those in your business plan. Here we need much more detail on the marketing and much more detail on the market analysis. And then funding or investment information. If I'm going to invest in your business, what am I going to get for it? KPIs, which are key performance indicators. If you haven't heard of that phrase before, don't worry. I'll come up again in a minute and explain what that is when we look at how to measure how your business is working. Financials. Can we forecast into the future as to what might come in? And also scenario modeling. So this gets much more detailed. But if we can plan out what the scenarios could be. So if somebody invests £10,000 in your business, does it mean you can buy in bulk? You can buy materials in bulk, so you can actually create something at a cheaper price. If that sells brilliantly, well, this is one scenario. If you can't get the raw materials at that price and it goes up, the other scenario is actually less profit. Now, are you comfortable with that gap? Scenarios around seasonality, Christmas peaks and troughs, maybe August, your business might be very quiet. How are you going to make sure you show over 12 months what those scenarios will be as you kind of have those peaks and troughs? And then lastly, in sort of the more detailed version, products and services, what are the descriptions and with a timeline? So if you're going to promise me as an investor that you're building a new product to launch to market, that's great. But when am I going to see a return on the £10,000 I've invested? Is it feasible to say you're building something very much in the tech space? and you're going to be able to go to market in 3 months. Well, do you know you're going to be charging? Are you going to be going for a free option first? When's the revenue going to start coming in? Because people generally won't provide, even with grants and loans, you won't necessarily just get money in the bank. You have to show there's a plan around delivering what it is that you've got the money for. So on the left, they're the kind of should-haves for a business plan. On the right, you might pick some elements of those to just bring in. But at least you now have a broader view of what should really be in a business plan and to what detail. SWOT analysis. So we need to get a good understanding of current and future opportunities. We're at the time of year when, 1st of January, we want to have a plan to get running again. So let's take the time to reflect on the internal environment. So what are my strengths? What do I do well? And that's very internal. Really hard to actually write that down. What we tend to do is start on the top right and find all the things we're not very good at. So where do I need to improve? Maybe I need to resolve and reduce these problems. So perhaps there's a bottleneck in the speed of getting something out the door. So what can I do to improve that? Maybe I need somebody to help me on admin. Maybe I'm absolutely terrible at web design work, web work and IT. So what I could really do with is somebody who can help me with that, because that reduces that sort of time wasted on me messing around on the website. What are my internal strengths? Once you've done your weaknesses, celebrate what you do. You run a small business, you are doing things well. How can you build and enhance on those? So what do I do well? Maybe it's customer service and customer experience that they absolutely love working together. So how do I maximize that? I absolutely ask for testimonials, quotes, videos, case studies, whatever it might be, or reviews. So you can start to spread the word and tell people how brilliant people who are like them find working with you. When I say like them, that means you're starting to form that sort of persona. I noticed in the chat there's somebody who runs a guest house. So you wear all the hats of a small business owner for sure, but you'll probably have a clear view of who your sort of customer or visitor is. So if it's not students, then trying to promote what you do in the space of, student notice boards is not really going to work for you. But if it's a boutique offering and it's brilliant for couples who want to escape to the country for a long weekend, that's sort of, you start to understand that's your market. You might be somewhere in the middle, and actually your location is really important and convenient for lots of people who go to different business events or on the way to the airport. So you can just sort of think about what those differences are, so you can then maximize your exposure within those audiences. Now, bottom left, we need to exploit and expand external opportunities. So how can we turn our strengths into an opportunity? What are the trends out there? What are the gaps in the market? If your strengths are your customer reviews, then how can you make, if you are that beautician, how can you start to create more revenue? Now, you probably can't have a second salon on your own because there's only one of you. But if you're starting to have other people working for you and under a brand, then you could stand to expand. Find out where the gaps in the market are, where maybe another salon has closed. That could be good or bad. It could be bad because there's no demand in that area, or it could be good for you because they've retired and they've just decided to have a change. But for you, there's already an audience who are expecting to be seen in that area. So you might find these opportunities start to come into your business plan as you're looking a bit more introspectively, but then also look externally to understand what's out there. Then lastly, the threats. We don't like to think about these externally, but they exist. So how do we avoid or overcome these threats? What's the competitor edge? Do they have better exposure than you? Do they have a better location? Are they cheaper? Does that matter to you? Maybe it doesn't, because you're absolutely certain you have a high quality product. But just understand that competitors are everywhere. What about external market influence or different obstacles? If we have energy prices going up, consumer spending can come down, the ability to have that disposable income can be reduced. And so that's a sort of a market influence on everybody. So how can you shift what you do slightly to be able to add value and make it really hard for them to not buy from you, but also not want to leave? So you want to get them in, but you want to build loyalty and sort of build that ongoing spend. So spending a little bit of time on an exercise like this is never wasted. It gives you a good view of what you need to build on, what you need to stop doing, what you need to kind of expand, and what you can try and overcome. That then feeds into your business plan. So you might have a business plan, or you're starting from scratch, absolutely fine. These 6 sections can really help you to create your plan. So just sit back and look at what your goals are. So what do you want to achieve in the next 12, 6 and 3 months? You've got your vision and mission and values, and defining why your business exists. So that just gives you that nice goal setting basis. And it's a good opportunity to revisit this and review it if you find that you're slightly off track, or perhaps you started doing something slightly different last year and it's gone absolutely brilliantly. Great. Well, are you going to carry on doing that and maybe change the business slightly to suit? Your audience persona. So who is your target audience? Do you know how they purchase and what drives their decision making? So are they, is it kind of impulse purchase, Instagram advert, that looks like fun, it's only $4.99, I'll buy 2 for the kids for Christmas, stocking filler stuff. And so what drives their decision making on a larger purchase takes much longer. So how does somebody select an estate agent, for instance? That's a major decision because it's a major life change. So how do you select who you're going to work with if you're selling your house? So maybe they want to look for reviews, they want to look at referrals. So how do other people recommend you? Maybe you find you get your business in because you get an email saying somebody says I should get in touch with you. Well, if you hear that a couple of times, you start to think, well, actually, I'm getting good word of mouth out there. So that's really helpful because it means that what drives their decision making is trust, prior experience, and somebody who, again, feels that it's a good fit. Where are they? What's their location, their age, lifestyle, etc. Favorite brands. You can often think, well, actually, if I want to sell these stocking fillers, perhaps people have think about the supermarket they might shop at, think about their disposable income. What's their client base if they're business to business? So you're almost 1 step removed or 2 steps removed from the end consumer. So just working out who their current client base is and how you might work with that business. Around to marketing, what are your messages? What's your strategy? And then what are the channels that you use, as we discussed briefly already. Bottom left, a bit more detail on the revenue streams as how people spend with you. But importantly here, what are your costs for your services and products? What are your fixed costs and what are your variable costs? Fixed might be rent, it might be material costs if you've already bought something in bulk, because that's already a spent sum of money. But a variable cost could be the energy it takes to make something. It could also be travel. So if you are a beautician, it's very straightforward to know when people come to you, say once an hour, what it costs to run that salon for 40 hours a week. But if you're going out to see people, then you lose time and money as you're traveling. So all of that's very variable. And then do you know how profitable you are in all of your products and services? This is an opportunity now to summarize your SWOT analysis, just in kind of what you do well, what you want to improve, etc. And then lastly, what's your value proposition? So what do people know you for? What sets you apart? What's your USP, which is your unique selling point? And do you have proof of this? Case studies or testimonials or Google reviews, TripAdvisor, Trustpilot, anything like that. So if you don't have anything yet, that's fine. If you're a new business, maybe test out your product or your service on family and friends in return for a review. That becomes suddenly gold dust. That's brilliant. That goes through your marketing, it's on your website, and you can start to build that trust when people look and say, oh, great, well, 5 people have given this a 5-star review. They start to, it builds that sort of validation. So then if we think about what goes into a business plan, it's quite helpful to think about what not to do with one as well. So here are some pitfalls to try and avoid. So 10 pitfalls that we could see quite often is the plan might be poorly written or is too vague. If you can ask somebody to review it for you, preferably say family or friends, but somebody you know who'll be supportive and critical, is it really clear what you're trying to say? Conversely, it may be too detailed and then hard to work with. It is absolutely possible as a small business to put a business plan on a page or 2 pages. It doesn't have to be 80 pages. But if you turn creating a business plan into an industry in its own right, you'll not be able to actually get the business going properly because you're going to spend all the time constantly living in this document and finding it's constraining you. So you really want to have it as a bit of a framework to help you rather than something that keeps you trapped in. It's easy also to ignore the difficult stuff. So I can write a great business plan that says how well thought out my business proposition is and who I want to work with and how big the market is, but really they're not to acknowledge the fact that there are 5 other local competitors all doing the same thing for a bit cheaper, who've been doing it longer, or that the challenges in the market that exist, and I'm just putting my fingers in my ears and going la 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 and pretending it's not happening. We do have to acknowledge what's going on. Another pitfall is having a lack of clear goals and objectives, and it becomes very woolly. And also a lack of flexibility or adaptability. If business in the last few years has taught us anything, it's taught us that we have to be okay with change. So we need to work out how to flex if something goes wrong. It's also number 6, having unrealistic timelines. So time is quite elastic, and I've found that we think we can do more and achieve more in a shorter period of time than we really can. So if you think you're going to get a new product to market in the next 6 weeks and you've also got Christmas coming up, you've got children and you've got a part-time job, that's quite a lot. So is it more realistic to say that I'll start planning in January, developing in February and launching it by Easter? What can happen here also is something seasonal. So we're now at the end of November and you're thinking, I must have a Christmas campaign. I must have something, package up all my products for a Christmas sale now. You might find you've sort of missed the boat on that. So just be sensible about what timelines you're working to. Another pitfall is not knowing who your target audience is or your market is really unclear. You might have unrealistic assumptions. So this is another problem where if you're not experienced yet, you sort of look out and think, well, if I was to make £500 a month for the first month, perfect, that's great. Then it's going to be 1,000, then it's going to be 2, then it's going to be 4. That's massive, massive increase. You need to be very sensible about what you're actually going to bring in terms of revenue, not income. And in the first year of business, what's it going to be? So it's easy to think, yeah, I can do 5 times this in the first year. But until you've had a year in business, you don't know what those peaks and troughs are. And you immediately think it's a straight line from January to December. But we haven't acknowledged the fact that there's an Easter holiday, which is a dip. And then August, things might die off a bit. And then December might die off. So it's sensible to look at what those seasonal impacts might be. And don't forget, build in a bit of time for sickness and holiday. too. Then the last 2 points, maybe there's inadequate research. We have a great idea, something we're desperate to take to market, but we haven't really researched who, what, where, when. And then also the business owner claims there's no risk, but there is always risk in things that we do in a business plan. The risk might be a statement around nobody's going to set up in this part of town. This will be the only cafe going. Like, well, that's not necessarily true. The risk might be if Starbucks move in, you've got a very different shift in your customer base now. So being objective and pragmatic is helpful, because if you're to look at any grant funding or get a loan for your business, then you have to acknowledge what the risks are and then how you will mitigate. Now, if we move into staying on track with our plan, what we want to do is just stop for a bit, work out what we've already achieved and celebrate what we've done this year. So let's reflect, go back and say, right, I'm going to write down what my goals for the current year actually were. How well did I do against them? What should I stop, start, or continue doing? So you might stop working for particularly a certain type of business, or you might stop a campaign that you've been running on social media that just isn't working. Continue doing what works well. And then obviously there's things you might want to start doing that you've identified in your SWOT analysis where you've got some opportunities. And then bottom left, write down what you want to achieve in 2025. So if we have this conversation in a year's time, you can look back and say, yeah, I did all that. And decide how you will measure success. So if you want to increase marketing spend and have lots of social media campaigns, great. But how will you measure success? Will it be conversion rate? Will it be income? You need to decide what those measures will be, and they'll be personal to you for your business. Right, let's look at now how to look forward. So we've reflected on what we've done already. We now want to look at our targets and objectives for next year. And in order to stay on track, it's easy to have this chat in a year's time and then suddenly go, don't know where the year went, it's just disappeared. I mean, I don't know about you. I think this year's disappeared already. So how do we make sure we kind of keep ourselves accountable as we break the year up into chunks? So we will have a long-term objective. So what is our, say, 6 months objective? And I've put it down as our big goal for the year. Maybe we can say we want to double our revenue by this time next year. Great, let's do it. Well, what do we want to achieve in 6 months' time? So by the end of June, 30th of June, what's the revenue number you want to have achieved? Therefore, in 3 months, what's that midterm objective? Now, don't forget, you probably won't have, if you wanted to double revenue in a year, in each quarter, in those 3 months, it's not going to be a quarter of that sum. You might find the revenue accelerates in the last half of the year because you've put in a whole load of work in the first half of the year. So if you think about it, your £100,000 revenue increase isn't going to be 25, 25, 25, 25. You might say in the first quarter of next year, I want a £10,000 increase. And because what I'm going to do is streamline the processes and systems that I've got. I'm going to start making sure we've become as efficient as we can. So in the second quarter, we can then start marketing like crazy. And so maybe that will drive a 25 or £20,000 increase. So it's doubled already from that 10. That gives you another 70 to achieve in the second half of the year. So perhaps you go for 30,000 in the next quarter and 40,000 in the following quarter. And then sense check that again against any seasonal dips or peaks and troughs. So if you break that down the year into chunks, you can then work out how you can achieve it. because that short-term objective then becomes monthly. So my monthly objective in the first quarter might not be make a whole load of money. It might be to review, analyze, and start planning what I need to do for all of my systems and processes to make them much more efficient. What tech can I use? Is there any AI that can help? Do I need to start outsourcing? Whatever that might be. So your January's objective might not have revenue attached to it. It could be a set of activity that you need to do that makes sort of helps you along that way. Then you can track what you do weekly. It's really important to break it down into weekly tasks, because in a month, let's call it 4 weeks, and that happens to be April. If you look at it cold, you think, yeah, that's fine, that's 4 weeks in April, not a problem. What it matters if kids are off school, and it matters if you're going on holiday. So if April isn't actually really 4 weeks long in terms of work, it's only 2 weeks, then it gives you a better view of what you need to do weekly, rather than having this like, yeah, it'll be fine, April's revenue will be absolutely great. Then you realize, you do the maths and you're like, oh, except I'm away for 2 weeks. Well, what am I going to do? You stop, you go back and say, maybe I need a bit more marketing in February, March to drive a bit more revenue at the end of March, so that in April I can afford a bit of a dip. And then daily, how do we have that consistency that means we're absolutely working towards what we need to do? Are my daily tasks around interacting on social media? Is it around cold calling? Is it making sure I'm planning 4 networking events a month? How do I know that what I'm putting into my business is going to come back as tangible outcomes? So the last sort of few tips on this bit are being smart. So setting specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals. As I said, it's not realistic to think you can put 40 hours a week, 160 hours a month. You can put those into 2 weeks if you're away on holiday, because that gives you 80-hour working weeks. Small business owners have been known to do that before, but you know, it's not really sustainable. How can you measure and monitor what you're doing? How can you track the targets? Don't forget to celebrate. We are not always brilliant as small business owners in stopping and celebrating what we've achieved. So do take time and tell the world, you know, that you've done something great, or go and open a bottle of something with a friend and you know, enjoy the fact that you've just signed up a new client, or you've reached a target. And then also working out what you need to improve. So you nearly got to something. Well, what do I need to improve to make sure it happens next month or next quarter? Stick with a sort of a process like this, and if you did this for a year, you'll suddenly find the difference that you're going through, and that sort of growth, and it gives you time weekly and monthly to change things if something happens, rather than, like I said, in a year looking back going, didn't achieve what I needed to, and I'm still 50 grand behind target. Staying on track. So there's a bit of a view which makes good sense, which is what gets measured gets done. And to give you some acronyms, to put them out there, because you may have heard them, you may use them, or you may not have heard them, and you sort of think, oh, I think I need these. If I just break down what they are, then you can decide. OKRs, these are objectives and key results. So they are top down and strategic. So what I mean by that is they identify what the desirable outcomes are. Generally a bit more corporate, a bit more sort of tech industry. That's where the phrase you see quite often. An OKR could be to increase our brand awareness and following on social media, which is a great intent. Whereas the KPI beneath that, which is your key performance indicator, is measurable. In that context, it might be something practical like increasing follower numbers by X% on Instagram, or increasing the click-through rate on our social posts by Y%. That means it's measurable. SLAs, they are service level agreements, and they are more more known in the service industry, but also very IT focused and customer service. This could be the time taken to address a contact, a complaint, a ticket raised. If you state that one of our team will always get back to you within 24 hours of you sending in a request online, that is your SLA, which means people do have a right after 24 hours to say you've failed in delivering that. So it gives you that view of what needs to improve or what you're excelling at. Other things to measure, which are quite helpful, is your sales figures, profitability, cash flow forecasting, your stock turnover, speed of sale, and your debtor days. It suddenly starts to sound a bit dry, but it's very practical in terms of how quickly do I get paid? Is it after I've delivered the project? My stock turnover, am I sitting on a lot of stock that's not moving, and so therefore I'm not actually making any money? So how can I sell it faster? Can I do a promotion? Can I get it into a different shop to start shifting that stock? So if you know what the speed of sale is, and if it's 6 weeks typically from advertising and actually getting paid for something, then you know your pipeline needs to have a 6-week time frame to it. So that if you now are looking at Christmas, you're thinking, crikey, that's only 4 weeks. What am I going to do to try and get money in before Christmas? So it just helps to have that view that you can then analyze how your business operates a bit better. How many eggs are in your basket and how big is the basket? It sounds very, very obscure. But do you have do you have maybe one main client only? In which case, is that really high risk? Because if they said, thanks, but market's changed and we've got to give you 2 months notice and we're not going to work with you anymore, then what are you going to do about it? Alternatively, you might have loads of very small clients and you'll run ragged. So think about how you spread that risk, and also be more efficient about what you do, because you might think, you know what, as long as I've got a great contract with one client, that's fine by me. I'm okay with that, because if I got given notice, I could replace them quickly enough. Something else to measure might be your engagement on social media and website analytics. There are loads of tools to help with that. Customer satisfaction scores, reviews, that sort of thing online. And then again, anything relevant to your strategy and goals. So that's personal to every business. But if you start to measure these, you'll understand more about your business and how people engage with you. And it means you're the one in control if you need to make a change. Then lastly, how do we have a plan B? So the most successful people are those who are good at plan B. It's sometimes easy to put on the rose-tinted spectacles and think, oh, no, it's fine. Everything's okay. My business ticks along nicely. I don't need to think about the future too much, or if something goes wrong. But by having a plan B, it means you're more resilient. Now, I'll caveat this with a page like this, the template, is great for what if something goes wrong, but also what if something goes right? What if, in terms of cash flow, you suddenly get a new contract that's massive? Well, you're going to have to deliver on it. So that's great, but do I know who I'm going to ask to help, how I can freelance and get support? So if you were to write statements after each of these, in terms of your cash flow, you understand what it's telling you. However, if it looks like it's going to change considerably, I will ... take the following steps. Business costs, I know what they are, but if they change significantly, I will ... Perhaps you travel to clients quite a lot. And if you think energy prices are going up, or your car insurance has gone up, you have a new car and your lease payments are high, or whatever it happens to be, and you think, crikey, I can't pass that cost on to my clients, then maybe what I would do in that instance is look at providing online sessions instead. So you reduce that cost considerably. In turn, that will change on profitability. If you understand what profitability is, and it looks like it might change, what can you do? Maybe you can offer bulk a sale on multiple items, because then you can buy at cost cheaper, so you can get it from a wholesaler less. Whereas if profitability is increasing, because actually you're doing quite well at the moment, then what are you going to do about that extra profit? Is that when you're going to start putting away in savings? Are you going to invest in a bit more technology to make you more efficient? How are you going to just keep that running so you're making the most out of your business? Marketing. So you understand the importance of data for your activities in marketing. If the data changes significantly or not changing after you've put in a lot of time or investment, then what will you do? Will you pull the campaign? Will you persevere? Or if it starts to change significantly and you're finding you get too much interest, are you going to just pull back a bit on the advertising so you could actually got time to service whatever it is you've been selling? Do you know, in terms of people and HR, what happens if somebody goes off sick? Is there enough cover? But if you work on your own and you're taking holiday or you're off sick, is there cover available? Can you pre-plan a holiday and say to your clients, I'm not available between these dates, and that's okay. Whereas if I'm off sick, what do I do? Is it okay to just say, actually, can I postpone? And if that's your business, that's fine. But if you are sending out goods and it's before Christmas and you've got a lot of orders, do you need to think about having family and friends help who can package and post for you? And lastly, IT. Is your client data or customer data saved securely, and is it accessible from different locations? So if it's not in the cloud, or it's not in the cloud and you have a saved hard disk version, then do think about how you're going to do that. There are a lot of people who run businesses who are sort of one cup of tea on a laptop away from losing all their data because they haven't saved it off in different locations. If you have, and it's on the cloud, you've just trashed your laptop, but that's just a piece of kit. That's inconvenient, but if you could log into the cloud from somewhere else securely, then that's absolutely fine. And is everything securely saved? So making sure you know what to do if your Facebook account or Instagram gets hacked. And have you downloaded all of the followers and contacts that you have into a CRM? Because if you haven't, and you get locked out of your account, you can lose a huge following. So it's good practice every month or so to just make sure, is my data backed up? Have I saved off all my followers' details or customer details? You want to get people off social media and into your CRM as quickly as you can. So you've actually got access to them, and you can then still get to your MailChimp or Constant Contact, or whoever you use, by logging in somewhere else, and you've still got that following. So just taking a quiet, pragmatic view, all of these things here can actually go back into your business plan. Don't be afraid to say to somebody who's reading your business plan because they're going to lend you money or something, that you've actually thought about these things, that you know what you're going to do, that if you suddenly win a new contract and you're going to become VAT eligible and you need to register, then I will be changing my pricing, putting out by 20%, but that's fine because I generally work with VAT registered businesses, so they won't notice. Or if I go VAT registered and I then have to pass that on to individual customers, what am I going to do about that? Do I need to just maybe stay under the threshold, which is better for everybody? Or if I go over the threshold, I need to go over significantly to warrant being able to swallow some of that 20% cost. Right. Now, I'm going to say that's me done. We've got time for some questions if you want to put them into the Q&A. Also, let me just stop sharing and see if I can read the Q&A. There we go. Right. So will we get a copy of the slides at the end? There will be the recording sent out tomorrow. So you should get that in your inboxes, and anybody who's signed up as well will get the inbox. Anyone who's signed up who isn't here today will still get a copy of the recording into their inbox. In terms of any other questions, let's have questions in the chat. If anybody's got any, that would be great. I can answer from the chat or Q&A rather than putting hands up because we are all muted. So thank you for your thanks, everybody. That's lovely. I hope it's been practical for you. So Marcia, never thought about backing up contacts. It's something that's quite a problem. And if you, some of the other Small Business Britain webinars will talk about it, especially with the social media experts, in making sure it's not your data, if it's in Instagram or Facebook, but how to bring it back down and say, right, these are my people, my followers, they kind of belong to me. You need to make sure you back that all up, because there are issues with getting back into accounts. And if you get locked out for 6 months, then you're very stuck. What else have we got? Any other questions? Let's have a look at the Q&A. Okay, so somebody anonymously just asking, struggling with predicting future in my industry as I'm the only business offering my services. How do I do this? That's a great question. If you do it little and often, you might not be able to predict absolutely everything, but if you are the only business offering your services, then in theory, you are already very differentiated and you should be doing pretty well. You might not be able to predict, but what you can do is look back on previous data and see how you might kind of extrapolate that forwards. Okay, question from Nicola. Being consultancy business, being project-based, how to plan for uncertainty or being commissioned for project and that speed of sale. Oh, yes. So it's not product-based. It's not a case of delivering something very quickly. It could be 12 months long. That's another way of working, really, when you need to think about your time and cost of that acquisition. Could be that you actually have to bid for work. If you think it takes 12 months to deliver a project, do you need to have a couple of filler projects? So if you imagine the jar being filled up, you put in the big rocks first, then the middling ones, then the sand fills the gaps, that you've at least got some other smaller projects that run through the year. You can find that you've put out 5 tenders, you're convinced you're going to win all of them, and you don't get any of them, which is frustrating, but unfortunately it can happen when you're in those sort of longer sort of project industries. If you think it takes you 3 to 6 months to actually meet people, get introduced, put in a proposal, have those discussions, then you need to think about your future planning for 6 months' time. So we're now thinking, probably now, if my February is looking a bit quiet in the diary, what does that mean? Probably need to start ramping up activity now, because it takes 3 months to actually close. Could take you 60 days to get paid after you've done it as well. So we're already talking about April. So it's not super straightforward, but I think I like the idea of having sort of the big chunks and the smaller aspects. Okay, so practical tips. Oh, crikey, now we have lots of different questions here. So many questions. Right, hang on, we're all in here. Everyone's been typing away. Right, Rachel's question on practical tips of breaking actions into weekly and daily tasks. Any advice about building that into a habit into your diary? It's easy for clients to take priority. I'd say it always is, but they're also the ones that bring in the money. But what I've done before is to colour in aspects of my diary. So what is client focused? That is one colour. Take travel out. I could do my emails if I'm on the train, but that's about it. And then what is networking? That's a marketing, not quite client, but marketing colour, because you're hoping to get money in. And then planning time, admin time. If you just have something in your diary that's it's kind of sacrosanct, it might be 30 minutes 3 times a week. Just colour it in do something fun with it. You've got emojis, do something that maybe works for you, or you've got a whiteboard. Everyone works differently. But if you color it in and say, look, I have to do that. And if I have to move it for a client, it kind of accumulates in the week. So I've got a whole Friday afternoon just working on my business, not in it. Okay, so we are going to have to wrap up in just a moment, and I'm just scrolling to see if there are any questions that might help lots of people on the call as well. Okay, there's a point here which I think is it's really honest. So thank you for sharing it, and I think it'd be helpful for people to hear that a business has made a loss in the last financial year, and that's been the first loss in many years. And obviously there's a bit of panic about next year. How can I use this to plan for a better future? It's really honest because it's not pleasant and it's factual. But what you can do is you can go literally go backwards and say, what can I strip out? What can I be more efficient with, if there's anything? Is there something I can postpone? Can I get better supplier terms? You might need to look at how you really structure the business so you can get that profit coming in for next year. You might not suddenly go way back up to where you were, but you might be more stable. So perhaps your business plan is all around efficiency and stability rather than growth. So you almost go back to basics, rebuild those foundations, and then you can start to take steps to sort of to move forward again, rather than doing something knee-jerk. Okay, we're going to have to wrap up now because we have reached time. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you for everyone who's chipped into the comments and who's participated today. Hope you found that helpful. I'd love to get me on LinkedIn, tell me that or Instagram, tell me when you've done your business plan. We'll set ourselves a bit of accountability by Christmas to get it all done. I'm doing mine as well, so I have to take my own medicine too. Right, thank you, everybody. Have a super Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope the sun comes out soon for everybody too. Thanks ever so much. Bye.